Next up, we have Balazs. Balazs works with PsyDAO. He currently works as a clinical data scientist working at the Translational Psychedelic Research Program at UCSF. And he's well known for inventing a self-blinding method which was used to do the largest placebo-controlled study on psychedelic microdosing. So that's pretty impressive. Here he is.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you everyone for being here. So I work at UCSF. I used to be at the Center for Psychedelic Research at Imperial College before, and at both of these institutions I have been part of the team that ran some of those clinical trials about psychedelics that probably you have heard about. And those are the trials that are really driving the current renaissance in psychedelic research. However, in parallel with that, within the psychedelic research circles, I am also known for running complex citizen science experiments. And here I want to make the case that while traditional clinical research with psychedelics is great, but I think there is a lot more untapped potential in using citizen science for pushing forward the boundaries of psychedelic research. The way this talk is going to look like, that first I am going to give you 2.5 arguments for why I think citizen science is the future of psychedelic research. And then after that, I'm going to transition into describing some of our plans with PsyDAO and how PsyDAO fits into the whole picture of using citizen science for the benefit of psychedelic science. So first, I'm going to give you the arguments for the thesis of this talk. And the first argument is going to be very, very simple. It's money. It's the cost of doing research. So when we are putting a patient through a psychedelic clinical trial, it costs about $10,000 per patient. Now, one thing which I need to emphasize at this point, that a lot of that is driven by sort of like advanced research methods. So for example, if you put neuroimaging into your trial, that is going to really significantly increase the cost. But even if you're just like thinking about like legal psychedelics, the costs are really mind-numbing. So in this first, whoops, is it going? What do I do? Okay, there you go. So this is a picture that was going around on Reddit a few months ago, and this is basically the price list of a psilocybin service provider in Oregon. So right now in Oregon, you can access psychedelic therapy legally, and this is basically the price sheet of one center, but the prices are similar across the state. And what I would like you to pay attention to, let's just look at this last line. So a high-dose session with 2.5 to 4 grams of mushrooms, 6 hours, that costs $3,500. Now, that's a lot of money, especially when you are considering that the street price of 4 grams of mushroom is about $20, maybe $30. Now, to be completely fair, I left this text here to be not to be unfair. So this $3,500 also contains some psychotherapy, specifically 1 hour of a preparatory session and 1 hour integration session. However, if you're looking still the value proposition of $30 for 4 grams of mushroom or $3,500 for the same amount of mushrooms plus 2 hours of psychotherapy, I think still the first version comes out to be much better. I am not a hardcore libertarian by any sense, but I think there is something to be said that, in the black market, you can buy mushrooms for $30, but if it hits the legal market, then the prices go up to $3,500. So regarding the costs, so I started with the talk saying that I'm going to have 2.5 arguments for citizen science. And the first one is the cost, and the half argument is something which is very closely related to the cost, and that is going to be the sample sizes that you can achieve with citizen science. So some of the largest studies on psychedelics are citizen science studies, and many of them are like this survey kind of research. So there's a researcher, the research team comes up with a question, and they put some surveys on the internet that people are completing. And because everything is run through on the internet, you can globally recruit, leading to the large sample sizes. And that sort of research is often associated with citizen science. However, I think we can think about it a little bit more broadly. Of course, if you're running a citizen science experiment that requires in-person contact, then things are going to get more complicated. For example, if you want to give your participants a variable, you can't just fly to everybody and give them the variable. However, I think there is something unique about psychedelics is that a lot of these logistics problems around more complex citizen science experiments could be easily solved only if there would be a place where there are lots of people in a small area doing psychedelics together. So is there anything like that? Of course there is. It's called raving. So this particular photo was taken at the Boom Festival, which is one of the bigger raves. And it happens every second year. And let's just think about the numbers quickly. So this is attended about 30,000 people, I believe. And I think it's a conservative estimate that 90% of the people there are doing psychedelics. So let's just say that, okay, not everybody is going to do your experiment that you're running on the festival grounds, but let's just say that we convince 1% of the people to do an experiment at a Boom Festival. So that would mean we started with the 30,000 people, 90% does mushrooms, you convince 1% to do your study. That means that you would have a sample of 270 people, which would make it easily one of the largest studies on psychedelics. Literally in 1 week at Boom, we could collect data from more psychedelic experiences than how many psychedelic experiences are going to happen in the traditional research context within the next few years. And I think this is exactly the power of the citizen science methodology, is that because so many people are doing it, you just need to have find 1% of all of these experiences and just channel those experiences into a format that is scientifically useful. Note that my argument for citizen science is the future of psychedelic research. The reason why that works is exactly this, because people are doing it. So for example, RTMS is another methodology that is gaining a lot of momentum for treating depression. It's where we are basically using a magnet to give electric stimulant to areas deep into the brain. The future of RTMS is not citizen science. People don't have those machines that cost hundreds and thousands of dollars sitting in the basement and they can play with zapping their brain. However, with psychedelics, there is a very, very large user base. So that's why this argument for citizen science works there. It's because this is something that is going to happen regardless. We don't need even to encourage psychedelic use. We just need merely to find the channels or to reach out and make sure that a small percentage of psychedelic experiences, we are collecting data about them in a format that's scientifically useful. Okay, yeah. So I said 2.5 reasons for psychedelic citizen science. I have one more left, but I think that's probably the most important one, and that's something that I'm going to call relevance. And what do I really mean by that is that there are lots of interesting questions regarding psychedelics that you're never going to get funding through traditional channels, nonetheless, that are very relevant to a large number of people using psychedelics. Let me explain what I mean. I'm 36-year-old, and this is an age where a lot of my friends are settling down, getting married, maybe having a baby, and getting a mortgage on their house. And for a lot of these people, everyday life is just becoming a lot more monotonous, a lot more gray, a lot less exciting things are happening. And I see that a lot of these people are struggling, but it's not that they have a medical diagnosis of depression or anxiety. It's just simply their life is very boring, and I think there is a potential for sprinkling some color on top of it, potentially with psychedelics. So in this next slide, this is a sample from the population, and it's about a measure of depression scores. And with the blue ones, you see the cases. So those are the ones who are going to meet some criteria for depression. And there are two important things about this figure. So one of them is that notice is that not that we have one bucket of data here, people who are depressed, and another bucket of people who are non-depressed. It's a continuous measure. It's a totally continuous thing, meaning that depression, it's not a binary yes or no thing, rather it is something that lives on a continuum. Now, the important bit is that with current psychedelic research, the paradigm is that we are using it as a treatment. You have a diagnosis, and we are treating that diagnosis. So we are only caring about the people who are here in the blue. But notice that if you would add up the height of these bars, then the sum of the green bars would be much, much higher than the sum of the blue ones, meaning that there are a lot more people who do not meet the medical diagnosis. Oh, why is this? Yeah. Who do not meet the medical diagnosis to be included in psychedelic research. Another way to think about it is that I think we can start to maybe think about psychedelics not as a treatment, but also like as prevention of future problems. Generally in medicine, there is a recognition now that it is much more difficult to treat conditions rather than trying to prevent that. And I think if you're thinking about psychedelics from that perspective, then the questions that you want to ask are suddenly very, very different. So typically what we're doing in clinical research is, in a sense, like, very short-sighted in time. If you're doing your baseline measure, you go through the drug experience, and then 6 weeks later, we measure how you have changed. But it's a very short time window. If you're thinking about more in a broader picture of like psychedelics as prevention, then the questions that are relevant are, for example, that what happens to adult people who are, let's say, use psychedelics a few times a year after a decade of that dosing regime? There is not going to be any traditional research funding to answer this question, but I think this is a question that is relevant to the psychedelic community at large, and I think these are the questions that are going to be potentially unlock the benefits of psychedelics for a much broader population, because now it includes people who do not meet the various medical conditions or medical diagnoses where currently we are using psychedelics. One more thing that I would like to emphasize here is that the way I think about it, it's not that citizen science needs to overtake or compete with traditional clinical research. I think clinical research is great, and in many ways, that's how I earn my living. I'm not going to talk against it. But citizen science has a great opportunity to complement traditional clinical research. We can ask questions that are never going to get funded in traditional channels and that are relevant, I think, to a much larger number of psychedelic users. So this was my 2.5 argument for psychedelic citizen science. And right now, I am going to transition into how PsyDAO can help push forward psychedelic citizen science. So the way a lot of citizen science work happens in this space is what I call like the traditional old school method, and that is the research team is proposes a question, they put, let's say, a survey online, and then members of the psychedelic community are going to fill out that questionnaire, and then with the data collected, we write a paper, yay. But notice is that here, really the value is only created in one direction. It is created for the research community because they are the ones who are getting the publication and the prestige associated with that and the ability to apply for further funding. And as somebody who has been involved with many studies that have used this model, let me tell you that this is actually very strongly in decline. And I believe the reason for that is because 5 years ago, there was a lot of incentive for members of the psychedelic community to help the research community to make the case for broadening the medical application of psychedelics. However, now that escape velocity has reached with psychedelics, and nobody wants to do these survey studies anymore because they're not getting anything out of it. And this is where I think using Web3 technologies and PsyDAO can come to the rescue. So the vision that we have for PsyDAO is to be this interface between the research community and the psychedelic community. One of the flagship projects that we are hoping to start very soon is what we are calling OPSI, the Open Science Psychedelic Platform, which is a platform that we are building on top of existing survey engines, but they are going to have this Web3 layer where if you are giving us data, if you are contributing to the research that we are running, we are rewarding you with PsyDAO tokens. So right now, the creation of value does not go just to the research community, but value is also created for the psychedelic community. But not only you get tokens, but one of the other important aspects of this platform is going to be the open science part. Unless you have been living under a rock, then you know that scientific research is in a replication crisis. And there are many reasons for that and many solutions. But one of the simple set of practices that we can do is open science, which is about pre-registering your hypothesis, sharing data and protocols openly, so on and so on. OPSI is going to be an open platform where everybody can propose projects, but we're only going to allow you to the platform if you're following some of the open science principles. Because we owe it to the psychedelic user community that research that we are supporting going to go for maximum scientific impact, and the best way to ensure that is to embrace the practices of open science. So we are hoping to build out OPSI starting later this year, and we want to launch immediately with some studies that we ourselves, SciDAO, is going to propose, but we are in contact with other research groups of what other research they would be interested in running on this platform. So one research project that I immediately would like to start with is like a lightweight survey project that focuses really on the long-term outcomes of psychedelics. So this would not be something where we are trying to measure what happens before and after a psychedelic experience in a short time window, but rather to really ask the questions, is that how psychedelics affecting people who are using it responsibly but over a span of a decade? We want to start with that, with asking this research question because it's going to take a long time to get to the end of it. Another question that we want to ask is do an experiment where we are really going to a rave, maybe to boom, where we are giving people wearables. There's this notion in the psychedelic community that ego dissolution is one of the central mechanisms of the benefits of psychedelics, and we also know that at rave some physiological signal between participants are synchronizing. So with OPSI and psychedelic citizen science, we have the opportunity to measure is that people who are more in synchronized with the crowd in the rave, are their positive benefits of their psychedelic experiences are larger than those compared to who are not synchronized with the crowd. Now, this is a provocative and very hippie question, but exactly that's the point, is that this is a question that I think is going to be relevant to many psychedelic users. They would like to know the answer, but there is zero chance of ever getting funding for it through traditional means. So again, OPSI is going to be an open platform, and the core technology that we are developing, which is about incentivizing the public to give us data for some of the studies that we are running. This core technology of tokenization, I think, is going to be useful not just for SciDAO, but it is something that can be used across the DeSci ecosystem. So I am going to wrap it up here. Thank you very much for your time and attention.